The liberation of the Netherlands. An event so greatly celebrated by the Dutch that they sent thousands upon thousands of tulips each year to the country that liberated them, Canada. Why is this so important?
What happened during the battle, and most importantly, is the inquiry question.
What are the lasting contributions that Canada has made to the Netherlands society? This will justify the insanely grand gestures that the Netherlands has now done for Canada.
How did this affect the friendship between the two countries?
My name is Chloe.
And I'm Zoe.
And this is CZ Productions. In order to answer our inquiry question and get a better understanding of the topic, we need to answer what is the liberation of the Netherlands? What life was like before the liberation happened? What the process of the liberation was and what actually happened, including Canadian contributions, what the long-lasting impacts of the contributions were, and how this impacted Canada's legacy in the liberation. On to part 1, what is the liberation of the Netherlands?
So what exactly is the liberation of the Netherlands?
It was a remarkable event from September 1944 to April 1945. Crucial to the end of World War II. The Dutch people were eventually freed from enduring severe hunger and hardship at the hands of increasingly desperate German occupiers, thanks to the Canadians, specifically the 1st Canadian Army.
Who fought in it?
Canadians. While other Allied troops helped to support them, Canada contributed most of the war effort when it came to liberating the Netherlands. Specifically, the 1st Canadian Army liberated the Netherlands. The army was under the commander, General Henry Duncan Graham Crerar, but I will get more into this stuff when I explain what actually happened.
Where did this take place again?
It took place in the Netherlands, which is a country in northwestern Europe. The country is low-lying, with less than half of it being just 1 meter above sea level. Through the use of dikes and seawalls, a lot of the areas were recovered from the sea or inland water. These areas are known as polders, and they were difficult to battle in. On to part 2 on what life was like before the liberation. What was life like before the liberation of the Netherlands?
Before the Dutch people were freed, they lived under Nazi rule for 5 years. There were many restrictions on people's rights in the Netherlands. Nazism is the idea of dictatorship and the allowance of one ideology. Dictators allowed no dissent or any other political beliefs. So, the Nazi Party used extreme ways to instill terror in the Netherlands population. For example, the German civil administration was installed to monitor civil services. And there was the Gestapo, who were Germany's secret police, to monitor the activities of the people. It is to ensure no one would overthrow Nazis' political power and influence within the Netherlands. In addition, the Nazi government carried out cruel reprisals in response to convicted members of the resistance. A reprisal is a punishment by military forces or a political group. That includes imprisoning them, sending them to concentration camps, and executing them. An example of that is the hamlet of Oosterhoeve. 160 men in the hamlet were rounded up and executed on the spot after resistant fighters shot the Nazi chief of police, Hans Rauter. This was the largest mass executed in the Netherlands during the Second World War. It is seen that Nazis had a strict rule and would use any way possible to oppress voices that might seem to affect their complete rule. However, they cannot possibly escape from Nazi rule from leaving the country. In terms of political control, countries bordering on the Netherlands were under German control and consisted of German-patrolled waters. It is highly dangerous to escape with Germany's equipped forces. Geographically speaking, the dense population with little forested or mountainous terrain in the Netherlands also provided no place to run and few places to hide from German forces. The Dutch had no choice but to accept the Nazis' rule. Another characteristic of Nazism is anti-Semitism. The Nazi rule in the Netherlands violated the basic human rights of Jews. They separated Jews from the general Dutch population so that Germans could conduct raids to seize a Jewish populated city and confiscated the property left behind by deported Jews. In 1942 alone, the contents of nearly 10,000 apartments in Amsterdam were expropriated by the Germans and shipped to Germany. More than that, the Nazis took 15,000 Jews in German administrative forced labor camps. 107,000 Jews were taken to death camps. Many Jews went to hiding in fear of torture and execution. However, only 2/3 of those Dutch Jews who went into hiding managed to survive. Another idea of the Nazi ideology is the subordination of the individual to the state. The Nazi government forced labor and eviction on people in the Netherlands. An example is the building of the Atlantic Wall. Dutch people were being forced to work on its construction, and many more people had to leave their homes to accommodate its construction. Another example is the introduction of mandatory registration for forced labor, which is also called the Arbeitseinsatz. It forced every man aged between 17 to 40 to work in German factories. Any Dutchman was liable to be arrested and taken to Germany to help with the work. Approximately 500,000 of them were successfully transported by the Nazis with force. They suffered from hard and dangerous lives in the factories. The subordination of the individual to the state also implies to the means of production in the society focused almost exclusively on supporting the war effort. It's mostly because of Germans' fear of losing power or being defeated. Means of production other than ammunition lacked supply due to insufficient labor in the fields. Prices of goods became unaffordable and sales also dropped. This caused a big problem of poverty among Dutch. In addition to the poverty situation in the Netherlands, another crisis, hunger winter, emerged. A punishing embargo on all inland shipping was put, and it severely disrupted the supply of food and coal. People suffered from hunger and cold as a result.
On to part 3 of the process of the liberation of what happened and the Canadian contributions.
So what's the process of the liberation? What happened?
It all started with the Battle of Scheldt from October 1st to November 8th, 1944. Battled by the 1st Canadian Army, it was led by Lieutenant General Guy Simons, in place of General Kruger, who was ill at the time. The Netherlands' Scheldt estuary is a tidal river and a gateway to the port of Antwerp. Having access to this port was essential for maintaining supply lines to Allied armies. Supply lines are routes used to deliver food, equipment, supplies to troops during the war. The 2nd British Army had already liberated Antwerp and its 45 kilometers of docks, but the Germans still had control over 70 kilometers that connected Antwerp to the North Sea. This task of liberating that 70 kilometers was extremely difficult because the broad estuary was controlled by the Germans on both sides and heavily fortified along the south shore, being terrible for attacks on land. At the northern coast of the Scheldt was South Beveland Island, which was connected through the mainland through an isthmus, a narrow stretch of land connecting 2 bigger lands and separating bodies of water. Going through an isthmus had to be done, even though it provided little to no cover, and it was easier for Germans to just fire in that one little area. And so they attacked. Many soldiers fought for months. Battling was fierce. But ultimately, the 1st Canadian Army and the Allied troops won on November 8th, 1944, with the major supply route being finally secured, and the first convoy of supply ships arriving at the port of Antwerp on November 28th. Then, there was 3 months of not much happening. There was just static defense. While American forces in Belgium retaliated against Germany's unexpected attack in the Ardennes forest, the 1st Canadian Army spent the winter on one side of the Maas River, guarding its sector in front of the front line in the Netherlands, since the Germans held the other side of the river. It was good to rest and regain that strength for the Battle of the Rhineland, which went from February 8th to March 11th, 1945. Winter was ending. This was an offensive attack over the Rhine River. This battle was unique because it was the first time the Germans were forced to defend its homeland. The battle was led by Field Marshal Montgomery, merging forces of the British, the 9th US Army, and of course, us Canadians. Canadians fought hard in Operation Vertibel from February 8th to 21st, clearing the Greifswald forest and the Siegfried line, and in Operation Blockbuster from February 21st to March 11th, clearing the Hochwald forest and the Nazi defenses around it, and cleared the rest of the land all the way up to the Rhine. Canada and the Allies contributed a lot, even though the tasks were tough. The terrible weather prevented them from using a lot of their usual tactical air support. Mud left many armored units immobile or not able to move forward. There were also flooded areas. But, thanks to the lessons they had learned from the Battle of the Scheldt, Canadians advanced forward successfully in those places, even without tank and artillery assistance. This helped push the Germans away from the Dutch because the German army could no longer carry on an effective defense. It was the largest attack ever launched from Dutch soil, with about 500,000 Allied soldiers. 23,000 Allied soldiers were either killed, wounded, or missing, with 5,300 of them being Canadians. But it is estimated that 90,000 German soldiers were lost, 52,000 of them were captured as prisoners. In April of 1945, the 1st Canadian Army cleared the Germans from the northeast of the country, recapturing the farmlands and canals. They also began clearing the Western Netherlands, which included the major cities of Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. But it was an exhausting campaign. As the British and the Americans fought more in Germany, the Canadians stayed and were ordered to liberate the rest of the Netherlands. Canada continued battling, with the Germans desperate to hold on to any territory in the Netherlands that they had. It was challenging, as they were slowed down by damaged infrastructure from Germans who blew up some dikes in the Western Netherlands, flooding some of the countryside, further cutting off their food supply. Because of that, and the hunger winter, where Germany stopped shipments of food to the Netherlands, many Dutch people encountered starvation. So, even before the fight ended, the Allies organized emergency food deliveries of food, fuel, and more aid supplies. This primary source image is an example of Dutch civilians loading emergency food provided by Canada to distribute to the rest of the Dutch people. Eventually, the Germans and the Canadians and Allies negotiated a truce. They agreed on a mission called Operation Manachauhound, which was launched on April 30th, 1945. Bombers would fly over the Netherlands and drop not bombs, but food. Specifically, the Royal Canadian Air Force's 405 Squadron marked drop zones for bombers, which contained many Canadian crew members. This caused much relief with the Dutch people, who were extremely grateful. On May 5th, General Charles Foulkes, the commander of the 1st Canadian Corps, accepted German surrender of their forces in the Netherlands, and Germany formally surrendered only 2 days later, ending the war in Europe. Finally, part 4 on the long-lasting impacts and Canada's legacy because of the liberation of the Netherlands.
What are the contributions Canada did?
Canada contributed most of the war efforts when it came to liberating the Netherlands. In fact, there were about 105 to 175,000 Canadian troops and about 200,000 to 450,000, including other soldiers that participated in the battle. But over 7,600 Canadian soldiers, sailors, and airmen died while fighting to liberate them. But now life was just so much better for the Dutch because of the Canadians. And as I explained what happened, a lot of the things I said throughout the previous section contained Canadian contributions. Back to our inquiry question, what were the lasting contributions that Canada made to the Netherlands society?
The liberation of
The Netherlands not only made Germany surrender, but also helped completely liberate Western Europe and granted the Netherlands and the world peace and stability in the long term. The end of Nazi influence on occupied countries means people in the Netherlands no longer have to live in fear. Canada liberating the Netherlands allowed the Netherlands to develop a suitable ideology to rule themselves instead of the Nazi rule. The current Dutch government runs in parliamentary democracy. Dutch citizens were guaranteed freedom of expression and to elect representatives to voice the views or wishes of the voters. Taking inspiration from the citizens' ideas, the government's policies and actions would be more effective and specific to the problems or situation. This helps with the stability and development of the Netherlands in the present day.
This also lessened discrimination, especially against Jews, because the liberation of the Netherlands meant that Dutch people were no longer under Nazi rule, so Dutch Jews gained basic human rights and now had fair and equal treatment from other Dutch people. This was further emphasized by the prohibition of discrimination in Article 1 of the Netherlands Constitution. Jews were no longer treated horribly.
In addition to this concentration of labor into warfare, the hunger winter crisis during Nazi rule caused many Dutch people to suffer from the effects of poverty. Famine is one example of this. Canada provided relief from the famine. and it satisfied people's daily necessities. Dutch citizens' mental and physical conditions improved greatly because of this. This caused an increase in the workforce because more people could work, and better. All thanks to the liberation, the economy in the Netherlands improved rapidly over years. The Dutch developed a high standard of living from their boosting economy. Currently, the Netherlands has the 5th lowest at-risk of poverty rate of 13.2% among Europe, and is the 15th largest in the world in terms of gross domestic product in 2022. In terms of Canada and Netherlands relations, the liberation of the Netherlands created a shared history between Canada and the Netherlands. The relationship benefits mutual commercial and foreign policy interests, like free and inclusive trade under the CETA, which is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and rules-based international order. The interests prevent political and economic sanctions from happening, and the Netherlands were provided with more international opportunities. They were able to expand their target markets and eventually foster the country's development in the long term.
So, how did this impact Canada's legacy?
The liberation of the Netherlands
Impacted Canada's legacy by helping to shape their national identity as peacekeepers and heroes.
The liberation of the Netherlands was needed to end the powerful influence of the Nazis and to end World War II. Canada played a major role in restoring the world's order. The Canadian troops saved lives by forcing Germans to surrender and withdraw. Canadians' overseas divisions and 2 independent tank brigades were united within a single formation, the 1st Canadian Army, to fight as a truly national force in the Netherlands. This campaign helped to shape Canada's evolving national identity and its legacy of peace.
Canadians were seen as true heroes because they helped fight in the Battle of Scheldt, the Battle of the Rhine, and other tasks in liberating the Netherlands to help end the war in Europe. This was very important. Even though times were extremely hard, even though the Germans deliberately flooded the land and the Germans set up many defenses, fortified positions, and ditches, the Canadians persisted, going from dike to dike and freeing the Dutch from the Nazi rule. In fact, after the Rhineland campaign, Canadian soldiers were even further distinguished and recognized, as General Dwight D. Eisenhower wrote a letter about it to General Cuyler on March 26, 1945, saying how the appalling conditions of the terrain during the battle speaks volumes to the skill and determination of Canadian soldiers. And Canada is remembered from not just liberators but also saviors, as they saved millions of people from disease and starvation in 1945. Therefore, Canada's role in liberating the Netherlands shaped their national identity as keepers of the peace and as resilient heroes. This was Canada's legacy then and now.
And how did the Netherlands feel about the liberation?
The Netherlands were really grateful for the liberation. Oh, they were so grateful. In fact, May 1945 became known as the sweetest spring. Canadians and other Allied forces were eagerly welcomed. The Dutch cheered and crowded the streets, even mobbing the liberating forces because they were so excited and thankful to be free from almost 5 years of Nazi occupation. The Netherlands even named streets after Canadians who had died in battle. On May 5th of every year, the Dutch celebrate Bevrijdingsdag, or Liberation Day. The Dutch royal family gave Canada 100,000 tulips as a symbol of Dutch-Canadian friendship, which has blossomed because of their liberation. The Dutch show their gratitude through tulips. Every year now, the Netherlands send thousands of tulips to Ottawa to show gratitude for Canada. It's known as the annual Canadian Tulip Festival, and it's tradition for the people of the Netherlands and the Dutch royal family to each send 10,000 tulips to Canada. The Netherlands hosts annual remembrance ceremonies for the thousands of Canadian soldiers that died to help free them. The memories of the Canadian contributions still last till today. There are many war cemeteries for the 7,600 Canadians who died in battle. People visit them regularly, including Dutch citizens, Dutch royal family members, Canadian veterans, dignitaries, and tourists. The 3 largest Canadian war cemeteries in the Netherlands are Bergen op Zoom, Groesbeek, and Holten. On May 4th, students place a tulip on each burial plot in Holten and a candle on Christmas Eve. Countries, especially the Netherlands, celebrate Canada's efforts on VE Day or Victory in Europe Day. There is even an annual international military marching competition called the Nijmegen Marches for the remembrance of Canadian soldiers. The Dutch have never forgotten Canada liberating them. 27 years ago, the mayor of Apeldoorn said, "You have to have been occupied to appreciate what freedom really means. And when you do, you never forget who gave it to you." The liberation of the Netherlands was so important, not only for the Netherlands, but Canada as well, leading to a deep, long-lasting friendship between the two countries. Canada has contributed so much to the Netherlands society through fighting in the Battle of Scheldt, the Battle of the Rhineland, and providing food and relief and more. Canada and its troops had strong, long-lasting impacts on the Netherlands society, having them freed from the Nazi rule and allowing for freedom and rights for individuals, and having more food enter the country, reducing the famine situations. It is important to remember this victory as a symbol of hope. After this battle, the Allied troops became stronger, the Netherlands was finally freed, and Canadian soldiers became more distinguished. It was important not to give up hope in this operation, even though it was difficult. And it paid off.
Thanks for watching CZ Productions. Please remember to like
And subscribe!
and share to everyone you know.
Yeah, everyone, including your grandma.
And comment.
Do you agree with us? What do you think are the lasting contributions that Canada has made to the Netherlands society? Also, buy my merch with the link in the description down below. You can get this really cool merch, okay?
Try it.
Alright, bye! If you're interested in watching more history content, watch this video next on the Philippine Revolution.